Here's a fun fact about me. Growing up, I was never super into Beyblade. I always thought it was, cool as any kid in my generation did, but honestly, that's about it. My school didn't really have that huge Beyblade phase that you usually see being discussed around when people are nostalgic about it. And looking from the outside in as a kid, I just thought it was mostly a luck RNG type of game because, you just spin the freaking top and whichever one's standing last wins. And my stupid little kid brain, I didn't realize there was strategy, technique, and strength to that. And despite maybe catching one or two episodes of the show, specifically the Metal Fight series, which was what was running back when I was a little kid, for those who aren't really familiar with Beyblade, it's now split into multiple different generations. The classic series that ran around the early 2000s, late 90s. The Metal Fight series, which was more like late 2000s, early 2010s. Burst that came around in like 2015. And more recently, last year, we got Beyblade X. Each of them is accompanied by signature gimmick for each generation. Most of them can be inferred by the titles alone. In different anime and manga series with whole different universes, characters, and tones. But yeah, back to the story. Despite also thinking it was pretty cool as a toy, I don't think I've ever even known a Beyblade. I would only really get into Beyblade a few years ago, actually. I don't know exactly when. I did watch a bit of Burst back in like 2016, 2017 when it was airing here on Cartoon Network Brazil, mostly because it aired right alongside Dragon Ball Super's dub, which I was super hyped about watching back in the day. From what I remember, I did enjoy those episodes I watched too, but I just kind of never really retained any long-lasting enthusiasm about it until probably around, I want to say 2020. We're talking early pandemic days here. I saw one tweet just sharing this banger of an opening sequence for Beyblade Burst Cho Z, the Japanese one, of course. And upon watching that, I realized, like, oh my god, the show actually goes so hard. It kind of just hits me in a very particular spot as far as vibe and aesthetic go. I'm all for this sort of over-the-top, unashamedly battle shonen type of energy that Beyblade Burst carries proudly and screams from the top of its lungs. In my head, Beyblade was just a silly little kid's thing, but like watching that thing is like, oh no, actually this might go hard. The general aesthetic associated with Beyblade Burst as a whole, I think kind of reminds me a bit of Pokken, which also has a vibe I really jive with this kind of metallic, sort of like very colorful, very maximalist sort of visuals to it. It's sort of Fruitiger Arrow in a sense that it's very skeuomorphic and colorful and glossy, but it leans towards a more edgy, fighting-centric, very anime, very shonen anime sort of visual style that immediately caught my eye. That, alongside the fact that, just the character designs, the rock music, the visual effects, it was all so crazy and so unabashedly cool in the cheesiest, little silly way possible, which is exactly what I love, that I couldn't help but be really, really interested in it. So back during that time, I did attempt to watch Beyblade Burst a few times, but it just sort of didn't stick for me. I did enjoy it, I just kind of forgot about it. Eventually, through those times, I did end up getting more into the Beyblade toys themselves. They're actually like surprisingly fun and deep, like a physical, almost video game type of thing with how complex the battles can be in the meta game. It's a mixture of more tactile stuff like toys and sports, in strategic card games and video games, making a very unique blend of something that's incredibly engaging despite being, a toy marketed at kids. Just watching Beyblade battles on YouTube or whatever, you can like see how surprisingly fast and engaging it is in a way that I didn't remember them being as a kid. I always thought it was just sort of like, okay, throw the tops and they spin, like they're gonna hit each other a few times, but no, it's actually like look at these battles. Look at the Japanese release Beyblades and how they move around the stage. It's all very, it's very dumb, simple fun, but it's also just very tactilely satisfying. The tops genuinely move really fast and make like loud noises and stuff. It feels like you're controlling a weapon. It's dope. And fairly soon into my journey into getting into Beyblade, Beyblade X was announced, which is the generation that came after Burst's reign back in 2023. And that's more or less when I got really into it, because that was a new opportunity for me to actually buy a bunch of the new bays that were coming out. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep up with the releases and the meta and see what people were talking about, and I'm gonna watch the new anime. Okay, I might have lost steam on the Burst anime, don't even know why, but I'm sure the X anime is gonna be even better, and I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna keep up with every single episode that comes out each week. And for a while I did. The toys are amazing, but the show, it's alright. It has fun characters designed by the amazing Posca Demizu of Promised Neverland fame, and I feel the writing ideas have a lot of potential, but the weird animation, the way they do the main character Bird's development, where he basically doesn't win any battle ever, and just a lot of weird pacing, made me lose steam with the show, maybe even faster than when I did with Burst. While with Burst I may have even watched less episodes, I've always been continuously interested in picking it back up, whereas Beyblade X is just kind of exactly what you would expect. It's not a bad show, I had a good time watching the few episodes that I watched. It just kind of rings hollow. I watched it because I like Beyblade and I like the aesthetic and the vibe, and it delivered me on Beyblades and aesthetics and the vibes, and that's about it. I guess you can say it's kind of a pretty good Beyblade anime, but it isn't really that exceptional of an anime, you know, like overall. Eventually just kind of get lost steam, kind of whatever, and I went back to Step Zero. But now I guess I was into the Beyblade tops themselves, so I guess it's not necessarily Step Zero, but as far as watching a Beyblade anime goes, I was effectively on Step Zero. But with that in mind, more recently, I decided to give Beyblade Burst another shot, because I thought it looked so cool and actually more appealing than Beyblade X ever did as far as the anime goes. But here's the catch. Instead of watching it subbed on some whatever anime pirating website, I decided to watch it dubbed. Because they have the entire show in multiple languages on YouTube for free. You can literally just find a playlist going around. It's official, fully official. And like, I'm usually a dub watcher when it comes to anime anyway. But with these kinds of kids shows where, you know, they change the opening songs, they change a lot of the terms and have a highly high likelihood of censoring or altering elements of the story, I usually like to stay with the original version. Pokemon is a show that you never catch me watching dub, like, ever. But in this case, it actually did wonders for keeping me hooked. Not only because, yeah, I could actually understand the language without having to read subtitles, but I was kind of just weaponizing my YouTube addiction. I would always open YouTube to watch videos anyway, so being able to do that and see the next episode being recommended to me all the time, it kind of reminded me to keep watching, not having to go through illegal websites, ads, and all that kind of crap also definitely helped. Moreover, watching the dub kind of makes a lot of sense for this kind of show, despite the previously mentioned reservations I have for these kinds of dubs. A lot of us watch stuff like Beyblade or Pokemon or Digimon or whatever dubbed as a kid, and watching this kind of show in my first language, because yeah, I watched it in Portuguese, was oddly nostalgic. Even though I never fully watched Beyblade Burst ever as a kid, it just felt right. And I ended up devouring the first 51 episode season in a few weeks, which is a thing I rarely ever do. I'm a super slow media consumer. Because here's the thing, it's even better than what I expected. Beyblade Burst takes an angle with its storytelling sort of similar to what a sports anime would do. It's compared to other kids marketing toy shows or whatever you want to call it, it's definitely a bit more grounded. The show revolves around mostly just a lot of really tense tournament arcs rather than some big overarching world-destroying plot or whatever. The shonen over-the-topness kind of shows itself more in the character designs, the overall aesthetic, and just as an extra pizzazz to make the battles a little bit more cool and a little bit more exciting. Where in universe, most of what's happening is just, you know, kids battling in sport, when the visuals are so crazy and insane and the feats go so well beyond human capability, it just works as a way to keep stuff a little bit more interesting. Other shows like it are usually all or nothing when it comes to this stuff. Either they'll do like a super grounded marketing commercial to the product they want to sell, or they just go all out and make it seem as cool as possible for the kids in the back. I never watched the Beyblade Metal series yet, even though people say it's really good. I should probably give it a watch eventually. But one thing that I've always thought was a bit, just kind of interesting and odd about it was how it just went completely off the walls insane after a point. And like, that can be cool, but also it means that in universe, Moses parted the sea with a fucking Beyblade. And like, that can be cool in its own cheesy way, but comparatively, Burst's eccentricities are more grounded. They just sort of treat Beyblade as a mainline popular sport. There's this one kind of weird scene where one character is at the doctor and he asks him, "Oh, do you do any sports, kid?" And he answers, "Oh, I do Beyblade." And the doctor's like, "Oh, so you're a blader," as if it's the most normal thing ever. And I'm not saying this to diss on any particular other show like this, or even the other Beyblade series, which I have no place to criticize since I haven't really even watched any of them, but because I feel like these kids shows eccentricities kind of usually make them a bit of a harder pill to swallow for most people who are just generally into anime and aren't specifically interested in the franchise in question. Even as a massive fan of the Pokemon anime, I would not recommend it to someone who's just wanting to watch a general good popular anime. Maybe certain seasons of it or particular portions of it do hit that level, but the 1,000 episode show as a whole is not really in the same conversation as other popular anime. It's not consistent enough to be in that conversation, and it doesn't have to be. It's a show revolving around a much bigger franchise than what it solely is, and it's mostly targeting a different audience. But it does make these kinds of shows particularly distinct and a bit more niche compared to, more popular shonen anime that everyone, any age, any disposition can be watching and enjoying. But yeah, again, in Beyblade Burst, the more out there stuff is mostly just used to make the battles more exciting. And oh my, how exciting the battles are! Stuff like Xander vs. Vaughn had me genuinely on the edge of my seat. Like, we're talking Dragon Ball levels here. These fights are so impressive. I was thinking, how cool can they make battling tops be? They actually made it kind of crazy. I was impressed. These battles hit similar to some of my favorite shonen battles out there. I kept me engaged in the same way that something like, a tournament arc could in a more traditional battle shonen. It's actually on that level. We're talking about battles that earn stuff like battle analysis and reactions by other YouTubers, and they get a lot of views, it's deserved. Meanwhile, the rest of the runtime of the show is dedicated to genuine interpersonal drama and connections between the characters. Just overall, a lot of character building. Not a show that's all about, let's make the action as exciting as possible and only focusing on that, like kind of the issue I had with, say, Jujutsu Kaisen early on, to some extent. You can check out my video about it to learn more. It dedicates the proper time to make the characters' bonds and rivalries feel believable, so that when they do step into the battles, it feels like there's some genuine weight and stakes to the whole thing. It's way better than it has any right to be. I had this idea in my head a while back for a, sort of good toy promotional anime story kind of thing, because I've always liked these kinds of shows aesthetically and conceptually. I grew up with Pokemon, I grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh! For a few years now I've been interested in Beyblade Burst, but I always felt like because they were, mostly kids shows made to market a product, most of them never really hit that level where I could recommend them without some sort of asterisk attached. The idea I had in my head was just create a show with that kind of rule set, make it about a card battle thing or a monster taming thing or something to that effect, but make it just a genuine story first and a marketing thing, maybe even never. Focus on the characters, focus on the world building, and make something that can be engaging for all audiences, because again, I just really fuck with this aesthetic, I really do like it. But Beyblade Burst already kinda does that. Maybe not to such an extent as I would imagine it in my head, but by going out of its way to build genuine character arcs, development, drama, and all of that, Beyblade Burst doesn't feel like it's trying to just imitate sports anime or battle shonen as much as it feels like just one more of them. It stands toe to toe with stuff like Dragon Ball and Jujutsu Kaisen as something that can purely be enjoyed as its own story, with its own exciting moments and memorable characters. Like the rivalry between the main character Val Aoi and I guess the main Sasuke/Vegeta stand-in Shu Kurenai, where it's not simply the edgy guy versus hyper main character guy dynamic. They actually throw a new interesting twist to it where Shu is not a complete asshole. He's actually a pretty cool guy that's supportive of Vault. As he grows into a level that's more comparable to his skill, where Shu basically starts as one of the best leaders in all of Japan, and it's nice to see their bond grow and how they interact with each other and how they support each other. It's a different, unique take on that kind of rivalry, and it doesn't feel like it's just trying to, oh, let's do the rival thing again. No, the guy who wrote this actually sat down and said, like, okay, how can I build two characters with a dynamic that's gonna be unique and new and interesting and can get watchers engaged just by being itself. The fact that even though it is a kids' toy promotional anime, it's able to be compared and contrasted with other rivalries like this as its own thing, on the same level, on the same conversation as those other rivalries. Already says a lot about how surprisingly deep the character writing is for this. Take a look at Shu's main character arc during the first arc of the show, where he gets a shoulder injury and is unable to launch his Beyblades properly, but instead of listening to what the doctor says and taking a breather, he decides to, no, I'm gonna keep battling, I'm gonna keep going. And it's this engaging thing as you see Shu basically destroy himself over the tournament arc because he just can't stop. They allow the characters to make wrong and bad decisions because that's how people would normally act. So it's more engaging as character building. You want to know, okay, so what's gonna happen to Shu? Is he gonna lose now? Is the injury gonna get any worse? Are the other characters gonna find out about it eventually? It's interesting to keep up with it because it's not merely just a generic interaction between generic character archetypes purely made to be cool. There's actual drama here, there's stakes, emotional stakes. The main characters for the first series are all part of this Beyblade school club that's formed really early on. And it's basically a stand-in for any sports club and your generic sports anime out there. It even has that same sort of, maybe even a little generic message of engaging with people with similar interests to you for the sake of bonding and improvement can be really healthy and really nice for people's lives and stuff. And with that, it's able to create a very engaging cast of main characters because the show dedicates a lot of time to, again, to letting them interact and bond. For the sake of pushing that message, it feels like just a bunch of kids hanging out. Just look at Wakia's character arc, where at first he's one of the main bad guys during the first tournament arc because he's so arrogant and stuff, and like he fights against Vault and is not in any way respectful about it. But then very slowly throughout the course of this first season, he grows more and more into actually engaging with the other characters. Then at one point he joins the Beyblade Club, and even when he joins, it's not like an immediate shift where, okay, now suddenly he's a good guy. Wakia is an interesting case because he's actually a realistic enough depiction of being a spoiled kid, and they actually take the time to let the audience know that and explore that idea. Some actual character building.
Couldn't sleep either, huh? Dude, the way you look up to Wakia like a big brother has serious ramifications for the rest of us here.
Yeah, you're right.
Boosting his ego the way you do, you realize you're setting him up for a major letdown.
I know how it looks, but Wakia's used to getting his way.
Huh?
His parents were always busy, and he was spoiled by his nannies. So sharing doesn't come naturally to him.
All right, go for it! Come on, you can do it!
All right, who's going to join my Bay Club?
That's okay, we're good. Let's go.
I'm guessing he didn't know how to make friends.
Brutal. I've got way more friends than I can handle. Being popular is rough, I tell ya.
We're all strong bladers, there's no debating that. The trouble is we still haven't gelled as a team yet.
That's true.
We're running out of time. We gotta find a way to get everyone together. Any ideas?
I'll think of something. Hey, thanks for looking out for all of us. It's cool to be able to talk about these kinds of things.
And it's very organic too when we see him trying to help out the little kids in that one episode with the rain, and we find out he's afraid of heights. Like, yeah, it's some cool character depth. Back when he was still sort of a bad guy, Wakia as the main, I guess, sort of lackey or supporter was this guy named Hoji, and with him they do something very interesting where they basically pull a Digimon and make, like Wakia, a very interesting, sort of realistic backstory where he's seemingly less wealthy than probably most of the main cast. He has a lot of siblings, a very big family. The way his hair is drawn makes me think he might not be Japanese natively, which, considering the show takes place in Japan, would probably make him part of an immigrant family. And his father actually works for Wakia's family, and it was through their fathers setting them up to be friends that they actually became friends and started Beyblading together. And again, it's just a very cool, sort of realistic depiction of how these relationships actually are formed in real life. That's a thing that you see in actual kids' lives, the conflict between social classes and family matters and that kind of thing. Beyblade Burst's focus on character drama also means that the emotional stakes are very high when the fights do happen, especially when, unlike certain shows, Beyblade X, the outcomes of the battles aren't always predictable. Just take a look at both battles between Vault and Louis. First, Vault is almost completely obliterated, but then he just barely is able to draw out a tie in one of the matches. He still completely loses otherwise. But then in the rematch at the very end of the season, you'd think Vault is gonna win because, oh, it's the finals and it's the last episode. But no, he actually loses and gets second place, and it's not like a Pokemon thing where they're gonna extend this to forever because the main character can't win. It feels like a genuine part of the character arc, and from what I've seen at the other seasons, Vault does get there eventually. And even when the outcomes of the battles are predictable, the truth might hurt even, because the show puts so much work into the characters that you don't want to see any of them lose sometimes. Take a look at the second battle between Vault and Hantaro, who's basically his best friend, and even though we all know Vault's gonna win because he needs to move on in the tournament, you end up rooting for Hantaro because he's such a cool guy and such a fun character, and he has this conversation with Hoji even about not wanting to lose and how he wants to make his mark and stuff, so there's almost this sort of dramatic irony to it. Battle between Vault and Shu at the end of the first tournament is also a good example of a battle that, one, you don't know who is gonna win, and two, you don't want anyone to lose. Up to that point, the show had pretty much been building up to that one singular battle, and both characters have good emotional arc reasons to both win and lose, so you really don't know what the show's gonna pull. And up till the very end, in that very tense battle between freaking Spinny Tops, it kept me engaged and glued to the screen, just hoping to see what would happen. This uncertainty, mixed with the joy of shonen character growth and power scaling, with you as an audience member being able to gauge each character's skill and power as the story goes, which to me is one of the biggest draws of watching these kinds of battles shonen. You're able to keep track of everyone's growth and progress, which is kind of cool to experience. Makes for a show that's just very hard to drop. It has that very I need to know what happens next sort of energy to it, because there's always gonna be the next battle and the next rivalry, and since things are always so uncertain and so tense and so engaging, it's hard to drop or simply say, oh, I want to stop now. No, you need to see what's going to happen to these characters. Is Vault ever going to become the champion? Who's going to win this next battle? Who's going to lose this next battle? And when things don't happen as you imagine they will, the reaction ends up being, I can't believe X character beat Y character or whatever. Because again, since the stakes are actually there through the good writing, it means that anything could happen, and that's super fun to see. In a sense, the show is the platonic ideal of the kids battle toy promotional anime genre. That's even a thing. While it doesn't necessarily have any themes beyond the usual never give up, power of friendship, and all that kind of stuff, it wins out in being just a really memorable and enjoyable moment-to-moment story. It's subversive to the rest of its genre, not by doing anything extremely different, but by just being uncharacteristically great for what it is. Which in a way kind of sucks, because the show still ends up being sort of a hard sell for most people who aren't interested in that kind of thing, which is part of why I'm making this video. I turned to a friend recently and was like, oh dude, how can I convince you to watch a Beyblade show? And he turned to me and was like, yo, yeah, that's not gonna be an easy one for you, let me tell you. And like, I get it, you know, like if you think of like an anime promoting kids toys like this, you wouldn't think it's as well written as Beyblade Burst actually is. It doesn't sound like that great of a thing if you think of it conceptually, and since there's no one big hook beyond just being so good, it's kind of hard to even put into words why it's that well made. The fanbase for Beyblade Burst is actually fairly big for what it is, but it's also extremely insular in the sense that it's talked about within Beyblade circles, people who already like the franchise as a whole, or at least the many anime seasons and like. I never see people in the wider anime community ever mentioning this show like at all, and I think that's a shame because, as I said earlier, I think this stands up with those shows. I think it's that good, which is like why I'm making this video, to be honest. And I genuinely deeply encourage any of y'all who are at the very least a little bit interested should check out a few episodes. You might be surprised. Longtime fans will know even more than I do about it and what makes it so good. Which is why I can't wait to get into Evolution or God or whatever you want to call it, the second season, especially since people say it's the best one out of them all. And with that in mind, I tell you guys to expect more videos on each of the seasons as I go through them, because I'm genuinely falling in love with this anime, and I'm probably gonna have a lot more to talk about as I go through it. So if you guys want to see any more of that, let me know in the comments below, and if you're already a fan, let me know what you like most about Beyblade Burst. Just remember to keep spoilers to a minimum considering I'm still going through it. With that in mind, thank y'all for watching and see y'all next time!